Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live interview with the master session with Derek Kosol. Today, we're going to have Ben Scott be our presenter and organizer for this meeting. Ben, if you're there, can you take over and introduce our featured guest?
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, my name is Ben Scott and I'll be presenting this webinar with Derek today. Now Derek is our prop design masterclass teacher here at the Computer Graphics Master Academy. He has over 7 years in the concept art industry and he's a pretty fun guy to listen to, so please enjoy Derek's presentation today. Now Derek, feel free to take the reins. Ted is giving you access to your screen, and give us a little introduction to who you are and what you'll be showing us today.
Hello guys, this is me, I'm Derek. This is what I look like. I've been working in the industry for a few years now. I graduated from Art Center College of Design in 2007. I was actually a car design major in the beginning with a focus in entertainment. And then from there I've worked mostly in video games, primarily for the first couple of years. Supervillain, Disney Interactive, things like that. Carbine Studios, which they just announced WildStar, the next MMO that should be around the corner in about a year or so. And then now I'm working at Titmouse Incorporated, making pretty much Adult Swim cartoons. My latest work is usually tied up in NDA, so my website is usually, my website's actually pretty old, so if you guys go to jojokosol.com, you can see most of my work from school till maybe about a few years ago. And then of course Black Dynamite airs this weekend at Adult Swim, which is Cartoon Network's channel, at 11:30 p.m. Central. So check that out. I do a variety of things as well. So I'll be primarily teaching the prop design class and doing this workshop to kind of promote it a little bit. But I've mostly spent my professional career doing environment design. But I've gotten a lot of chance to do all kinds of things. So some of these things are like creatures, various critters that roam these video game worlds.
I want to
Like
take a few seconds to let the members of the webinar here know that if you have any questions for Derek, feel free to enter them into the question box. I'll be going over those questions and selecting them and sending them Derek's way so that he can answer your questions. So if ever you have a question pop up while you're looking at anything, feel free to send that in and we'll ask that question. Feel free to continue, Derek.
Cool. Okay. So this is just some of my work that I've done in the past. Mostly car design stuff on this set. A few scooters, motorcycles I've done for Yamaha on my internship. Really fanciful things that never get made. So I found myself in school liking designing things that could never really practically be made a lot better. They're visually more interesting to me, but nonetheless, it's fun to do. But I'm also really technical minded, so at some point I would have to figure out how things work. And for me as a designer, that's pretty important stuff because, as artists, there's a lot of different kinds. You guys can do really whimsical things. There's room for that, like a lot of old school Disney features. Or you can design for something like for Prometheus, right? Which is exactly the thing I want to, I chose to, for the demo I'm going to do in this hour, after seeing Prometheus, there's a few issues I had with some of the design issues, and I kind of wanted to address that. So that's, live action where things should be believable. Those little probe thingies that kind of scan that alien complex didn't make a lot of sense to me in that it felt like it was kind of a plot convenience. So I'll be going over that and designing that a little bit later. But that's an example of like really realistic design. Like the Prometheus spaceship itself was fantastic. It was modular and it articulated, and it had a sense of realism. So these are some of the characters I've done in the past to show you guys more examples. Not something I focus on, but I do get the chance to, I'm kind of a generalist, which I found it really works well if you had a smaller company because you're able to be more flexible. You can do more things. It's more interesting. However, I think if you go to a bigger company, from talking to a lot of my buddies at DreamWorks and Pixar or Honda or Ford and all these places, you tend to be more of a specialist, like specifically the car design guy or specifically a character designer, a background designer, things like that.
I see that there's a lot of traditional work as well as digital work. Is there a certain time when you grab the traditional tools and like to use those, a certain time when you like to do digital, or a hybrid of both? Which do you go with?
Yeah, about that. I went to school at a very specific time. Like, digital was being used professionally, but I wasn't quite professional yet, so I didn't really know what they were doing. And so, when you see an image like this, um, in school, I really liked traditional, and I felt it very important to master. And then I was really slow at digital. But then what I think I realized, especially the first few years out of school, this is going to be like 2008, the late 2000s now. I started to realize, man, there are plenty of awesome digital artists that never really touched paint in their life. And, I thought that was kind of a crime at first, but like, if you're awesome, you're awesome. It doesn't really matter what your medium is, even if it's digital. And so I started focusing more on painting digitally and trying to maybe mimic a look. So pretty important. It was a difficult, I think a little bit more of a difficult transition for me, but if you're really good traditionally, all those skills should be able to translate pretty quickly. And if you find yourself working digitally already, don't, I wouldn't maybe necessarily miss digital or being analog, I guess is what we call it. But if you choose to take traditional painting classes or just exercise it, just go out and paint in oils and things like that, it's totally worth your time, and it's definitely something you can bring back. So, I recommend mesting with both. Like, these drawings were done in chalk and on vellum with markers. You can even see like how jagged some of these things are. I mean, you guys can probably go on the site without having to see it here, so you can look at these individually on your own and get higher resolution, actually. You can definitely see the markers in, I think, this sketch, right? So this one is just a black marker with a bunch of different colored chalks. And of course, I explore other things like 3D. These days, a lot of people are able to do really, a lot of things. 3D is a big part of the process now. You don't have to be amazing, but it makes sense to learn because, to be honest, especially in environments, some things are just faster to do in 3D, especially if you have to do like these echoing architectures that's like futuristic. You can plot all that stuff out in 2D by yourself, but it's going to take a lot of time. It makes a lot of sense just to make it once, duplicate it, maybe even run a quick render so that you can paint over it. So the process has evolved, I think, quite a bit from my instructor's days to kind of what we're doing nowadays. I mean, I work primarily in a 2D studio now, so I don't think I've touched 3D in a long time, but still something good. I have an animation reel here, but I don't think I'm going to load it up here. It's just going to take a while. Once again, you guys can check it out on your own. Now, the latest thing that I've worked on is Black Dynamite, and I'm kind of hesitant to show the latest images just because this is still to air in about a day and a half. But this is the trailer that you can see. So this is online. You guys can check this out for yourself too.
Now, mostly on Black Dynamite, what was your responsibilities for the production?
For this, I'm pretty much a background designer for the show. It overlaps quite a bit with prop design because the art director and the creator, Carl Jones, actually, they insisted that the world feel as complete as possible, and cars had a lot to do with it. So I got to draw and sketch a lot of cars inside the show, and that was really fun. But if it actually required a design, for example, we needed a Cadillac sled in one of the episodes or something like that, the prop designer, Damon Rand, he handled it. But once he designed it, then I kind of incorporated it back into the background. And if it only appears in the background, which I like to do a lot, just kind of like make jokes and have, I guess, Easter eggs is what you call it. I like just making stuff up, like other weird vehicles. You're only going to see it once and toss it in there. Sometimes it'll get scratched, by the creator, and that sucks. But a lot of times, like, they like the idea, and then they'll get me to modify it to kind of put a little bit more of a spin on it, or they'll like it as is, and then it'll make it into the show, and that's pretty satisfying. So that's kind of why I like doing backgrounds a lot. Actually, it's because you get to do a lot of props as well. In reality, as a prop designer, that being your sole job, what kind of sucks is, in animation, maybe some character has a toothpick and he's picking his teeth. You got to design that. And I mean, I know it could be awesome to make something boring really cool, but it's just it's just not really that interesting. However, if you get a sports car you need to design, obviously that'll be way more fun to do. So it'll be, some days will be more fun, some days will be less fun. So this is the latest work that I have to wrap up kind of what I do and some of my images. This you can find directly on the internet, actually. If you just Google, I think, Black Dynamite animation or something, this appeared in Juxtapose magazine. So this is what a final key background would look like painted. And I didn't paint these. I think either Patrick Morgan or Chad Wood, both great guys from with experience in animation. They worked at Nickelodeon. They were the painters. They pretty much take these black and white images that I gave them, like this. So this is the layout that I designed and cleaned up. This would be clean, a clean final layout. And then they tossed paint on it with this watercolor texture, because that's really the style of the show. It's got this 70s traditional medium, and to touch with that idea of traditional versus digital, the show is entirely digital. We do all the backgrounds in Photoshop, but we have these watercolor scans, and we manipulate them, add color dodge, so that it kind of looks traditional, and I think it's pretty successful. We get a lot of people asking, like, how did you guys do it? Was it traditional or whatever? And a lot of it's just a black and white process, and then you add, again, these textures underneath. So if you guys paint traditionally, you can always bring and incorporate those skills. Because honestly, people don't want to see digital weird stuff. You get this uncanny valley thing where it's not quite real, and the human mind is kind of repulsed by it. This image came from the pilot, actually. This is Brandon Cuellar worked on the pilot, so I basically needed to match his style, which in TV animation is one of the subjects I go over in my. I actually spend the first and last week of the prop class talking about this heavily. So this guy Brandon designed the style of the show, and being a background designer for the 10-episode run, I need to match his style, because if I did my own thing, it'd be like, whoa, what are you doing? The show is going to take on its own look, and that goes double for character design, prop design, every other element on the show. It's got to follow a cohesive look. And so on the first episode, they needed a view of the front, which was never provided because you never see it in the pilot. So I basically needed to make sure that this shot not only looked like this exact car, but at a different angle, and all these black and white shadow shapes, like these areas, this line work, it pretty much needs to match as well. So hopefully, if I did my job right, using what I know, then you should be able to, see the line weight and the shadow shapes have consistency. I mean, if we all did our jobs right, basically no one would be able to tell who did what on this show, which is really important in TV animation. For live action, it's a little bit less significant, because everything's going to be made and manufactured. You're not really going to be able to tell other than the form language. So this is like Brandon's cool. This image isn't mine at all. This is this cool hood ornament that's part of the opening. and you can see it here as like this little blip, right? So this is just, again, matching forms and things. So Black Dynamite has a dojo that, if you guys have seen the film, and if you don't know the history of Black Dynamite, this animated show has an attachment. It was originally a spoof-off film of old blaxploitation movies from in the 70s, done in 2009. And this show basically continues his adventures in a world, right? And in the movie, there's this dojo. So then I had a little bit of an opportunity. You know, I totally got to design this entire set from scratch, and make it any way the creator saw fit. And they weren't exactly clear what they wanted in the beginning, so I kind of took liberty and did a whole lot of, I just changed it up quite a bit actually. There's a kicking bag here, brick walls, glass, this yin-yang symbol, like a little samurai sword dojo setup. Here's those kung fu dolls, those wooden dolls that you punch and things like that. So that was really fun. Roscoe's Diner, that has I guess one of the running gags in the show is that Roscoe's, I'm sure you guys are from around the world, Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles is this famous Californian, I guess it's Californian, restaurant that serves really greasy food. One of the running gags is that Black Dynamite helps him figure out the Chicken and Waffles formula. So there's a sign on the store that changes every episode into something really odd, like grits and jello or something super, super disgusting, until he finally figures out the formula right in present day. Because this is actually a real restaurant. This I got to design. It doesn't look anything like the original restaurant, but it's, again, fun to do. And then here's just some of the other characters by other artists. This is, I think, our director, maybe, what's our director's name? LaShawn Thomas. Or this might be one of Chase Conley's. He's our lead character designer. It might be some of his sketches, promotional art, etc. So that's pretty much my work and a few others. I guess it's a good time to maybe get to a little bit of a demonstration in this next 45 minutes.
That'd be perfect. Feel free to start right up. And as questions come in, we've got quite a few here, and we'll be asking them as Derek is working here, and as they apply to what you're doing.
Any questions so far, or should I just go ahead and?
I would go ahead and start, and I will give you questions as they come in. There are some questions here, but I believe that some of them you're going to already be going over the answer to, and I'll let you do that in kind of a natural flow. And then if there's anything additional, I'll make sure to pull it up for you.
Okay, perfect. So 45 minutes to do a bit of a demo, like a teaser, a teaser for some of you guys that might be interested in taking my class. So I mentioned Prometheus. I really liked it a lot. It was a really divisive film, evidently. Either it seems you hated it or you loved it. I'm the latter. I just liked a lot of the ideas, the deeper ideas that went behind it. It took a lot of reading after watching it, and it took a lot of talking amongst other people that didn't hate it to try to figure out what was going on. And I felt like there are a lot of Easter eggs in there. But I don't want to get into that kind of argument. The design was fantastic, except for a few things. So that probe, I don't know if you guys, maybe some of you guys haven't seen it. They launched these spheres into the atmosphere. They might have some of these. I'm sure there are these little LED lights on it, and they kind of fly around and like radiate this red beam that built a CG model, real time almost, of this complex that these people found on this alien world. And from a design point of view, I was a little bit frustrated with that as a convenience, because they kind of fly, and because they're simple spheres, I don't really have an idea as a viewer of how this thing works. Does it use some kind of anti-gravity thing? If they have anti-gravity probes, why bother having jet engines on Prometheus, right? Because there's obviously this anti-gravity technology. If it used maybe some kind of propellers, like I didn't see it, so that couldn't have been the case. So there's just a lot of weird questions that I think the design of this object didn't offer at all, which is why I chose to do it for a demo for today's workshop.
I think that shows a
And
little bit how important it is to make the props consistent within the universe and tell the story.
absolutely, um, and you really got to understand that universe too. Once again, Prometheus is supposed to be realistic. The first Alien was really believable. That mining ship and even the alien creatures, we didn't understand it, but as weird as the form language of the alien was from H.R. Geiger's original design, it really implied a lot of, it had, even though it was surreal, it was the fine line between like surreal and believability. You didn't know what it was, but you kind of felt like it could exist. And I just felt like simply this probe basically didn't offer that. So my process usually starts off by just thinking about that. Why do I feel this way, and what can I do about it, or how would I go about designing this thing? First of all, we have to understand what's this probe used for. We basically have, and I'm just going to draw a side view here. There's basically, let's say there's some weird alien complex, and it's an ant farm, let's say. It's got all these odd rooms, some openings, things like that. Maybe you come in here, and I'll just hatch a little bit to make this sketch a little bit more clear. So this needs to be explored by, your aliens, which I guess would be us. So the probe scans, that makes sense, right? It can radiate these scan lines, which we have that technology today, except for the flying technology that it has. And it makes me ask the question, well, how would I make it fly? How could this thing fly? When you think about it, if this movie takes place in 2089, that's not that far in the future. And let me express this point of view. We've been driving cars for over 100 years. And if we look back to the 1890s, a car was basically a wooden box, probably powered by steam on some wooden wagon wheels, and then they gave it a seat. Now, our cars look significantly different from that today. We really have these really sexy shapes, made of molten metal, if you will, seen from someone from the 1800s, right? But, I mean, it still has four wheels. It still carries a passenger, and people still sit in it, and it has some kind of power plant, whether that's hydrogen-fueled, electric, gas, it doesn't matter. The package is basically the same. So one can argue after 100 years of automotive technology, basically nothing has happened. And if Prometheus were to take place again in 2089, to me that's not that much time. We might be able to build a spaceship. You might allow for Moore's law to be able to develop those kind of technologies. So that's fine. There's a level of sustained disbelief there.
It sounds like, from what you're saying here, that understanding real-world designs and how those develop really play a part in your prop designs for fantasy, science fiction, and all of that.
Oh, for sure. Especially if you go, I mean, I think it depends. You can be completely whimsical. I'll bring up another example, Samurai Jack, right? Really great 2D cartoon from Cartoon Network. Or even Star Wars. Star Wars has the Force, that idea, and you kind of get some superhuman feats coming from some of these characters. If I were designing for that movie, I would need to be aware of that. It's like, how whimsical is it? Or how realistic is it? If you guys remember the small Gattaca, from 1998, I believe, it's such a believable science fiction world, and it was all character-based, but it was complete reality. There wasn't a lot of this magic or alien technologies. So it really depends on the context of what you're designing for. The class is actually titled Prop Design for Production, right, Ben? It's not specific like for animation or feature film. So
I think
that's
it's
why
even
I
more
kind of
general. It's just prop design.
Yeah, it's just prop design. So, but yeah, it's I go over in the class a lot of I get really philosophical. So it's not that open-ended where you'll get lost. But I will cater, like if you want to design something for industrial design or something realistic, like that's totally fine. If you want to do something absolutely whimsical, like Spirited Away or some of Miyazaki's film, like that's totally fine too. It just basically requires an understanding of, you know, basically the context and the nature of what you're designing for. So anywho, this probe's got to design, this probe has to scan this structure that we have. And so before I begin sketching, my typical process is to go on Google or Flickr and get some images. So
we have a lot of people asking about how you do that reference, so I think this will help answer those questions.
Oh, sure. So those references, right? It can actually come from anywhere. Like I said, if you were doing, it depends on the nature of the project. If you're at Disney, perhaps, you might actually be looking at other artists, like how did N.C. Wyeth paint those clouds? So you'd be referencing a lot of his work to design that kind of look in your art for, you know, Sleeping Beauty 8 or whatever it is. Hopefully something new and original. But because I'm going to focus on film for this demo and this realistic sense of thinking, I went across Google to type in random things like probe. And also, since I work with a lot of friends that are designers, you know, I have a bunch of friends in other studios, and we're human, guys. Like, we watch YouTube, we watch cartoons. Like, I race cars on weekends because I enjoy it, or I try to because it's rather expensive. You know, whenever I can, I try to go to the track. And I'm just interested in all kinds of things, and I feel like it's also important for artists to be complete as human beings in that, you know, you should be dating people. You should be playing instruments if you enjoy that. If you don't enjoy it, don't do it. Don't make yourself miserable, obviously. But, you know, try to enjoy a lot of things and bring it back into your work. Like, as you guys can already tell, like, I'm a nerd about this stuff. Like, I love this stuff. I love flying machines. I love contraptions. You know, I like race cars. I enjoy cartoons and weird stories from Japan, from, you know, the States, you know, wherever they come from. Star Trek, Doctor Who, all that stuff, all good things. And so thinking about all that and having it influence what I'm going to do, I'm thinking I need a technology that allows this probe to fly. And so one of the things I'm aware of and what I search in Google is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but this is really weird and creepy. This is a Xbox Kinect up here that's been hacked because it has an infrared like detection sensor thing. And there's basically this little flying helicopter device, and there's a lot of these. This as an example. It's a basic four-prop helicopter that allows itself to balance. I wish I could show you guys videos, but time is pretty limited, and so is connection probably. But based on this technology and you stacking a Kinect on top of it, if you guys YouTube this thing is really weird. It starts flying around looking for things, and if you put your hand in front of it or if there's an obstruction, it actually stops. It knows something's in front of it, and it'll guide itself to move around. And I think there is actually a scanner on this. So this is 2012. Basically, this Prometheus technology practically already exists. It just doesn't look as cool as this sphere. But now when we look at this, like, if we were to use this in a movie, especially in Prometheus, it just doesn't look cool. It's just goofy, as most engineering things are. Other ideas that I had, like, why does it have to fly? That's kind of expensive technology, isn't it? What if it had wheels? And then I'll start thinking about what are the limitations of wheels. So this image gathering process, sometimes you can spend forever. You know, obviously you have a deadline. Hey guy, we need a probe in like 3 hours. Like, all right, fine, I'll try to figure something out. But if I didn't have a time crunch, you know, I would really think about how unique I can make this. This little Roomba has a Kinect on it. I think that's really awesome. This robot vacuum cleaner. We have other things like, you know, I'm looking at what have we sent to space? What does that look like? So I think this is Spirit or Opportunity, one of their arms. Another larger rover object that I'm not sure this project at NASA saw the light of day, but this gives me form language. Some of these bits give me ideas of what I might start to draw. I like this because how devastatingly simple it is, because I don't want it to get complicated. I understand that in a live action movie, people aren't nerds like I am. So they need to, one of the important things about a visual design is that people need to read, it's called reading what you see, right? If you see it for 2 seconds, do you understand what it does? That's really important. If you had 2 seconds to look at this, I doubt you know what it does. And therefore, we can't use this shape as a design unless people are incredibly familiar with it, but I doubt that's the case.
It sounds like
I
there's a
think
big emphasis focused on communication from the design then.
absolutely. Visual communication, we'd call it. So visually, it needs to read. Yeah, it needs to read, basically. If I saw this on the street, what I'm reading is something can blow up, and I think this thing will be perfectly okay. It seems to be built that way because it's got these big, heavy gears. It's metal, and it actually, this is what the bomb squad sends out first, I believe, and it looks that way. And so I think it's, in terms of real life, it makes a lot of sense.
Now, you've got a
This,
lot
if
of
it blew
different
up,
images here. Oh, I'm
oh,
sorry.
there's all
I was
kinds.
just going to say there's all kinds of images here that are very different. What kind of thought process did you go through that made you think, oh, I want to look at the kind of vehicle the bomb squad uses, I want to look at spaceships, small toy helicopters? What kind of thought process do you go through to get this kind of reference?
That's a good question. It's actually really random. Uh, Basically, this last 10 minutes, you guys should have noticed I'm talking to myself and I'm making up weird stories like, it's like, hey, this looks like, this would get a bomb or something. It's got tracks. Why does it have tracks? Like, I'm thinking about mobility at this time. So this guy's controlling it, right? And then I'll just jump off on tangents like that, and that's how I gather these images. But I'm always reflecting against the project. So again, this probe that needs to scan a space. So I'm asking relevant questions. I don't, like, this remote control might work. That might make sense. Should it be automated, or should it be completely remote controlled and tethered so that you can see exactly what the probe is doing, so it doesn't run into a wall or anything like that? This is another form of mobility. This thing will kind of just roll on a flat surface, but then it pops up on itself if it disorients itself. And I think that's actually kind of clever that the Prometheus droid is a sphere. If it were to hit something and fall, it can kind of just roll around, reorient itself. So it's actually successful in that way. But that's pretty subtle, actually. Actually, I've went ahead and designed a few of these images already, just because, once again, an hour is not too long. But I'll get into that a little bit later. Once again, getting back to this image gathering process, humans are incredibly mobile, and the nice thing about legs is that you can cross all kinds of surfaces. That's why people are actually developing these leg robot droids, actually. Here are other versions of it. Again, just having fun, talking to myself, having fun stories like, how would this thing move? This thing's super cool. This just rolls around, and then if it needs to climb a surface, it will actually pop itself up, and look how high this thing can go. Like, this is real technology at this time. Again, it's pretty nerdy, but I like looking at those things, which means I can get away from having this look like a sphere altogether. I can totally, why couldn't it be a box? Because a box may be a more pleasing shape visually in terms of a film design, because it'll read right away, perhaps. You can tell what it's doing in the first 2 seconds of introducing this thing, because it's not going to get a lot of screen time. Obviously, you want to spend more time with your characters than with this robot or a jet or something like that. This thing's really creepy if you guys have ever seen it. It's a walking quadruped, and there's a YouTube video where someone just kicks it over while it's walking, like just tries to shove it, and it doesn't even fall over. It balances itself, reorients it, and continues on its path. And it's just incredibly odd how it does that. Scary, but inspiring at the same time. And there's a lot of these. Once again, if it needs to fly, I'm looking at these helicopters with these cameras. This just looks like something you can buy at Best Buy or your local electronics store, attached to one of these. So pretty ghetto. These, again, I don't think these will read immediately after 2 seconds. And that's my point in showing you guys these images. If I showed you that in 2 seconds, that reads right away. You can probably figure out what this does because it's really simple. It's got all the basic elements to show you what it does. On the other hand, right, something like this takes a little bit longer to read. So on screen, this is not going to be too successful. So here's a series of these guys. Again, the Scorpion, the one of the Mars lander rovers. We could even do a probe, a flying probe. The problem I have with this and the way it's not going to work is that if you were to fly this into an interior alien space, again, to go back to the concept, if you run into a wall, this thing's going to crash, right? Because airplanes require constant movement, like kind of like fish. Well, fish can hover around, I suppose, but airplanes can't stop at all, and so this isn't going to be a very successful design. Not that I can't make it work, because that might actually influence the script, where one of the engineers or one of the scientists tells the captain, like, "Hey man, our probe has to fly, and there are too many walls here. This isn't going to work." And so I think that could also influence the script in a positive way, in that it's like, all right, okay, so we're going to have to walk into this thing not knowing what we're doing because our technology isn't ready or isn't developed enough where we can easily scan this. And once again, when we come back to this original idea, that's why I feel like this is a bit of a plot convenience. This can tell all the characters everything, and I really do think, if you really think about the script and the design, it really affects this. I mean, it's a lot of people just want a good story and they don't really care about it. But I'm going to bring up one film that I think everybody here should think about, and that's 2001: Space Odyssey. That film was done 50 years ago, and its prop and vehicle design was done so well that it's still relevant today. If you watch that now and you look at the anti-gravity or the gravity, the auto, or what do you call it, synthetic gravity space station, those are still things that they're talking about creating today, because that's how it should be done. That's how we can conceive it in the real world. And so once again, like, that makes that film so much more believable 50 years after the fact. The question really is, watch Prometheus 50 years from now, and what are you going to think? Like, Blade Runner is supposed to take place in 2019. 2019 is around the corner. Our cars aren't flying yet. I'm a little disappointed in that. And so again, like, think about the gravity of that. How influential, how forward-thinking do you want to be? So anyways, let's get to some drawing. This is my first pass. I like that sphere idea, and I had a few ideas that I wanted to explore. But in talking to you guys now, I actually have a few other ideas, because maybe I don't want this to hit something and be able to recover by rolling around and reorienting itself. Maybe it is clumsy, or it's got legs or something like that. So I'm thinking about some of the other possible things I could do. I have no idea what I'm doing, by the way, at this time. This is just the next part of the process is exploration. I really want to explore what this can look like. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw something, get something out of there. And then
so usually you start with research then, and then you move on to your
I definitely always start with research, because actually what sucks is the times where I've gone ahead and designed something and without thinking about it, the final ends up looking that way. It's a nice drawing, and it looks like, oh, well, it looks like you just drew something and had fun and really didn't care about anything. And that's okay, if you're sketching in your sketchbook and you just want to draw, because sometimes you don't want, like, let's be real, sometimes you don't want to think. Transformers, you can argue, like, oh, that movie was terrible for all kinds of reasons, but sometimes you just want a popcorn film, like, I just want to see stuff blow up and all kinds of stuff, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if you're trying to pass that film off as well thought out, with characters that you could really believe in and get behind and make you think about your own life, you don't kid yourself. Like, that's not the kind of film that is. And if it's trying to be, then that's where I would argue that it's not successful. But if you just want to blow stuff up and watch cool stuff, you know, and you know that that's what it is, that's fine. You know, there's room for all of that. And as I'm drawing here, like once again, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but then I'll always reflect back to the original thought. You know, this has to scan. How does it do that? How does it mobile? What happens if this happens? What happens if something hit it? What happens if it ran out of batteries and all that stuff? Should it fold up? Does it need to fold up? Would convenience be proper? You can ask an infinite amount of questions. You know, wouldn't it be cool if the corners of this guy broke off and turned into little legs? Because once again, the legitimacy of legs is that it can creep and crawl through all kinds of terrain. So it can really move around. Not sure why I need this. Well, instead of erasing it, what if I made that like a scanner? Because again, that's a secondary feature. I suppose primary feature. One of the primary features is that this guy's got a scan, and I can spend another 8 hours on Google looking for what do scanners look like. You know, how do you record information? Do they have laser beams? Maybe it's like that little weird toy you put your palm on and all these spikes fall out to create some kind of contour map. I mean, it's pretty odd for scanning alien surface, but you know, why not? Especially if you're trying to be unique. That'd be fun to see in live action, actually. Some kind of version of that that's practical and useful. And once again, I'm just talking to myself, having fun with all these stories, which is very much part of my process, designing. The more you think about this stuff, the more, and actually draw and sketch to show that thinking or communicate it, then your viewer and your audience will see that too in the final product. It's like, wow, when they start thinking about it, they'll realize that you thought about it. And how awesome is that, right? If you guys ever went to a cathedral or something like that, you're impressed by its visual and striking size. And then all of a sudden you go in and look at it, and then you start thinking like, how did they make that? And then how would I make that? And then you're like, hey, they thought about that too, because you can see it in the architecture that they had to carve this away, or how amazing is that? Everything's hand carved. It's like, wow, it took a lot of people to make that. So you gain an appreciation for it. As opposed to today, we mass manufacture everything. You could really care less how amazing your USB stick is, because you know there are billions of them. They just stamp it out. Or even a car. Cars aren't even that special anymore. They stamp out hundreds of thousands of them every year, the same exact model. Everyone drives the same Civic, right? It's not really special for the next guys because it's made from the same factory. So this leg idea might be incredibly cool. What if it looked like a complete robot, you know? Ooh, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, what if this had a little trailer, and then it had that tractor tread that we were looking at earlier? Which also, by the way, what you guys don't see is like I have a second monitor, and I feel like I should mention that because I'm always looking at reference. I don't just look at it and then put it away and then start designing. I always have it. In the old days, before I could afford 2 monitors, I would print them out so that I had them on my by my side all the time, looking at things. Again, here's that scanner. When it gets in trouble, maybe actually this is a really bad sketch, but that's okay because it's giving me this next idea. This next idea is this robot can fold, and maybe it has, again, this tank tread. So it mostly moves on tank treads, but then when it gets in trouble, perhaps these legs can sprout out. So it can reorient itself. and then resume coming back on tank treads. And this is a pretty complicated idea, so it might require a second set of drawings. That's basically... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say we have an interesting question here that brings up a good point, that that a flying object might be better at going over these different areas. A crawling object might have some difficulties. But when we're doing these prop designs, it's not necessarily always what would be the absolute best way to do it, but what are ways that are possible? What are ways that make sense in this universe? Would you say so, or how would you approach that?
Oh, absolutely. Once again, the script is probably pretty important, which I just don't have. And not only the script, but the development. Because it very well could be the director's like, no, we got to make it fly because we got to move the script along, and that's important. But I think if exploring what this could be, like it crawls and stuff like that, it could allow you to have some really cool visual. I mean, how cool would it be to have this little guy be here crawling, and then you can set up. Actually, let me give myself a little more real estate here. Image, canvas size. Let's just extend this guy. Because if he's low to the ground, you can get a really cool low to the ground shot, and you can really see this. You know, what if we have that Prometheus head? You kind of see it uncovered this way from a really low POV. I mean, and Ridley Scott's really all about cinematography because he's a cinematographer, you know. To have a really cool shot like this, as opposed to you're in a probe droid and then I guess you have these tunnels and you kind of fly around. You know, it's okay. But I mean, do you want an okay shot or do you want like a really cool shot, right?
So it sounds like there's a lot of logic that has to go into it, not just how this object would move, but also how would it work within the story and within the cinematography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, like, the sphere thing could just have been a mandate saying, like, we really got to move the story along quickly, and this solves the issues, and, you know, that's fine. Like I said, I wasn't there for part of that process to know all the levels of thought behind, but I'm sure they had these conversations. And as a designer, doing this and this part of the process, you could have that. You could be part of that conversation, and that would just be awesome, right? So you can really, hopefully, you can influence maybe some of the sequences of the film. As a prop designer, that's not likely at all. You're probably really going to be dictated on. It's going to be like, nah, we need this, and so fine. You unfortunately get a little bit less clever about what you do, but that's just part of it. I think every director is a little bit different. There are some directors are really like again 2001. For 2001, Sid Mead designed all that stuff. Man, as an industrial designer, prop designer, that guy had a lot of influence in some of the things that were being shot in Kubrick's film, based on that real-world thinking. On the other hand, if you're something that's really plot-driven or character-driven, it's kind of like, no, we just need we just need like a sphere, or we just need a cube car, and that's fine. And then you're just going to make that cube look as awesome as possible if that ends up being your job. It really depends. It really does depend. So I mean, I wish I had a solid answer for for that idea, but yeah, I think it depends, quote unquote, is really the best answer I can give. So this robot, I can add a little bit of values like I have previously. Right, for me, a scribble like this is enough. Well, I might do a tighter sketch, but for now, I'm just still exploring ideas. So you'll see me do a billion of these. And you see me draw this character here, or you can see that I've drawn a character. This idea to me was something... This was a set to me. Let's make that a little bit sharper for you guys. So this idea was that hovercraft idea with those images that you saw. And I thought it would be cool that they conveniently pack up into little cylinders like this. So this character could totally have... I don't know which character this guy would be. Maybe he's the... he's the navigation guy. Let's call him that. He would have a backpack, and then he would just have a bunch of these cylinders behind him. So once again, this is really a crappy drawing, but to me it gets the idea across. If my idea in my head is a lot stronger and I don't want to spend the time to draw something cool like this, it's totally a part of my process to just draw a really quick sketch like this. That is, I mean, I'm talking like post-it, cartoony, but it communicates the idea. Once I've recorded this idea, man, that gives me ideas for other sketches. Now I can be like, okay, these tubes, maybe it breaks apart like this, and then maybe they transform into this. So this is the first stage. This is the second stage. It starts to unwind itself, and then it opens up into what ends up being practically this drawing over here. And then it just goes off, flies around, and does its scanning. And this is pretty much the idea that I've chosen to illustrate for a final when I've worked on this the other night. And this is what I ended up with. And this isn't complete. I think it can definitely spend a little bit more time painting and refining a few things. But let me just scrub the layers for you guys to show you my process when I painted this.
And before you do that, a quick question we have here. Now, would you be showing the director every stage of this process? Do you just show him the final image? Where are you getting your feedback at that point?
Absolutely. Every stage. I mean, not every second. Not like you do one sketch and like, hey, can you check on this? Because to be realistic, the director is really, really busy. He's overseeing everything. Overseeing prop design, character design, script, story, reiteration, post-process, music. This guy's running around, so... you know, if your director has the time to talk to you all the time, that might not be a good sign. On the other hand, you definitely do want to see them, and they'll have like they have dailies basically in animation, which is basically you see a working version of the film every day, but they break it apart to teams that are real, that's pertinent to your team. So for example, like I'm the prop designer, so there will be a design meeting maybe once a week. Like every Wednesday and Friday, Mr. Scott will come in and for between 3 to 5 p.m. and like, okay, let's see what you guys got for designs. And I'd imagine in live action film, it's a little bit more freedom to go from thumbnail to maybe a quick rendering to like a final. I wouldn't jump immediately to a perfect 3D model that you're going to use in a movie, because Mr. Scott might be like, hey man, I didn't approve that. Like, because he might not want to go in that direction. On the other hand, there might be times where he trusts you and he'll be like, I trust what you do, that's why he brought you aboard. Like Daniel Simon, he's another industrial designer, that contemporary. That guy's really good. He did a lot of designs for Tron 2 and even the TV show. He's worked on that. He even did a few designs for Motor City, Disney XD's TV show. That guy's really good, and people bring him on board because, like, I know what you do. You know, do your thing, do the Daniel Simon thing, and he can push his ideas pretty far along because you can trust him. But if you're a little bit new, and I'm still considered fairly green in the industry, you got to go through. You don't have to show them the images that I've showed you guys, like the photo reference stuff. This stuff, if they want to know, if they see something in your design and like, why did you come up with that idea? I could be like, look, I got it from this right here. This makes sense to me. And then they go, oh, you know, they might be sold on that, and then end of discussion. But on the other hand, in my job, for sure, in TV animation, they're going to have to see this first. We would call this a rough. Absolutely important. In your design meeting, got to go through this first. Once we do this, and once they approve this, then I'm good to go to do something like this. But if I went ahead and did this, they're going to look at this and like, no, what you wasted your time. I wanted to do this. Especially in TV animation when time and budget is incredibly limited. The only reason why a lot of TV doesn't look very good is just because there really isn't a lot of money and a lot of time to do it. As opposed to live action film, I mean, starting from zero to get to a final film, it takes like 2 or 3 years. These guys get quite a bit of time to polish their images. So once I start to get to the stage of the rendering, I usually have, let's turn all of these off. I have my rough. I basically blew up that thumbnail, literally. Added a little bit more resolution to it because it would have gotten really, really pixely. The background, I don't think I even bothered until towards the end. And then there should be a line drawing I did here. Hopefully I've labeled it. I'm usually pretty good about that. Here we go. And then sometimes I have this white that I like to flood in. I did this sketch based off of cleaning up this rough sketch because, to be honest, right, like I work pretty messily. This to me just gives me an idea of what I want to do. I know that there's some kind of engines here, some kind of fan blades I'm thinking of, a basic shape for the body, but at some point I really got to clean it up, and so that's what this is. Let's turn it at 100% to be really, really clear. So I'm starting to refine things, making sure my ellipses are absolutely essential. I set up paths here, and basically what paths are these perfect ellipses for this drone. I'm articulating them a little bit. So I'm starting to think about how these fan blades or engines articulate and move before really committing to, you know, some kind of permanent line drawing. And then I'll clean up these lines, etc. So this gives me a guide to start painting, which is a pretty simple process to me. You start with blocking images in. So this is really a flat color. You know, if I zoom in here, you can still see it's pretty messy. I'm primarily just blocking out the shapes. And if I remove the lines, you can see it even clearer. This egg was pretty simple to me, so all I did was block this in flatly and then just run a gradation. To make an egg, I'd have my base color, and then while I'm still in that selection, I can have something like an airbrush. You know, pay attention to my light source. It's like here, a little bit of reflected light. Slightly stronger light source, and boom, you basically have an egg. Old industrial design technique. This comes from the chalk days, actually, but a lot easier, faster, and less messy to do on Photoshop. I can actually eat lunch at the same time while I work, unlike in the school days.
So it sounds like the focus is to get the idea there as quickly as possible. Don't focus so much on refining at this stage, just so that you can communicate to the director what you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so if you run into a situation where it's like, hey, Ridley really thinks it's important to finalize this probe design because they need to build it because they're going to shoot really quick, right? And off meeting, they're like, he's going to see you at lunch. What do you got? And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is all I got. It'd be nice that it doesn't necessarily need to be polished because he understands, like, you know, a reasonable director is going to be like, I can't expect a finalized design in 2 hours, but it's important. I need to see what's, you know, if he trusts you enough and he just likes the direction you're going, he just wants to check up on you, maybe say a few things, modify this a little bit, so that when you do finally finish it, it's exactly what he wants. Hopefully he knows what he wants. It's worse. It's the worst when your director does not know what they want, because it's pretty frustrating to try to basically read their mind, which I'm not good at. I've gotten better at that over the years, but still not good at that. And once again, like blocking in this shape, and I discussed this in my class, a really clean, sharp silhouette like this, based off of this line drawing, I haven't really rendered anything, and you don't need to. Like a really clean, clear silhouette is 70% of what you're gonna read. This might be enough for Mr. Scott to be like, all right, it's cool. I like where it's going. You know, just finish it. I'll check up on you at the end of the day or something like that. So then I can go ahead and continue once he's given me the approval, you know, thinking about my light source. I'm just adding paint. You can see it's pretty messy. That's what it actually looks like underneath it all. More of the same, just adding a little bit of reflected light. Same thing. I chose to make these spheres. bumping up a little bit of my light source, adding reflection. That definitely comes from the car design days. So here are some engines. I cheated on this, which I go through in my class as well. I just made one and I copied and pasted it.
I think everyone just heard cheating is encouraged in your class.
Cheating cleverly is encouraged. Cheating poorly is discouraged. But I mentioned it in the models earlier. Actually, it's like why if you had an industrial complex that was incredibly, how would I say, architectural, right? Like definitely intelligently designed architectural. You can have a arch that's, let's say it's exquisite. It's got all these elements going on. You can choose to, push this into perspective and redraw all that 1,000 times, or, and I'm really into tricks. I'm into working smarter, not harder, right? Because you want to spend more time being creative and thinking about the design and less about actually executing it. So I can take this and transform this into perspective. Oh, actually, I should copy and paste that. So this is just technique. Then I can copy and paste that on top of itself. And this is how a lot of architecture is done. And you just keep multiplying into infinity, and then you actually get a real sense of how that, how that works. So that's really cool. Now that's just junk, so I'm gonna delete all that. Okay, so anywho, that's how I kind of made these engines, right? I mean, let's be realistic. If they're 4 engines, they're gonna be the same thing. Why would you? You're literally just wasting. If I saw you individually painting that, I would be like, you're wasting your time. They're the same. If they were different, on the other hand, and you tried to copy and paste it and change it, I'd be like, yeah, you should probably individually draw each of those. That would make more sense. So once again, if you guys walk away from anything that I'm teaching you today in design, like this little tidbit, whatever it is you do, make sure it's appropriate for the context of what you're doing. And to me, that's kind of like it could almost be a proverb, just that can go deep in if you take it with you everywhere. Whatever it is you do in life, make sure it's appropriate to the context in which you're doing it, right? If you're trying to be someone you're not, is that appropriate? Shouldn't you just be yourself? If you're an actor, well, your whole job is to be someone else, so it wouldn't make sense to be yourself. Therefore, being yourself would make you a bad actor in that context, right? Something to think about. So here's some glows for the engines, which I think at this time I had a background at this point. Otherwise, the glows don't really show up very well. Adding more glows, painting a few more details, a little bit of reflected light to make this a little bit more realistic. Adding a parting line, which all a parting line is. It's a dark shape. Oh, don't die on me, Photoshop. That would be not good. So I can just create a line and then select a highlight. Really simple, there, and I kind of have a parting line. There are obviously cleaner ways to do this, but I'm starting to prefer a lot more grit in my work, even if it's live action. You'll notice that things in life are hardly perfect. I've noticed that if you design like a MacBook Pro or an Apple product in illustration, it's kind of boring and not absolutely interesting at all. But in life, because we know those things are difficult to manufacture, they look absolutely gorgeous. On the other hand, if you have something junky like an old lead pipe, steampunk kind of technology, in life it looks kind of ghetto, but they make for fantastic illustrations because there's a lot of stuff going on. Really odd, but I kind of noticed that. I think there's one thing I didn't mention when I did this that I kind of forgot, but I didn't forget because I guess it's a good time to bring it up now. There's actually 2 references that I designed this based off of, not just the mechanical hovercraft. I also understand that there's a visual aesthetic that needs to take place in a film. It needs to look pretty, right? So another visual set of image references that I went about is I collected some of Philippe Starck's design. I really like his stuff because I think he's a great designer. He's just got these really simple shapes that they're just beautiful, and they're incredibly simple, and that's what I like about it. This is a colander. I think this is where you put your spaghetti or something. I don't know if you'd want to spend $800 to dump spaghetti in this, but some people do. Whatever makes you happy. I love the graphic design in his watches, especially this. And again, look at Prometheus. It's the future. I think what was powerful in that movie and successful in terms of design is its graphic design and interface. So I want to make sure I hit that, and that's why I got this cool designer that I'm looking at, right? This almost looks like it can belong in that world. This could be like one of the little vases. You just put some alien writing on this, and boom, you're practically done. So I'm gathering visual references as well that I know apply to what I'm doing. More watches. I think a lounge chair. Some glasses. This is the weirdest orange squeezer I've ever seen, but really cool. Almost looks like a rocket ship. Some of the ribbing in the design in these chairs. And if you look at this image, so if any of you guys had a question of like, why am I drawing certain shapes? So if we go back to some of these earlier sketches I was doing, you see this ribbing information I have here? And even some of these I have in here. That's where I got that from. I didn't just make that up arbitrarily. Once again, I was looking at these references, not just this robot one. Oh, here it is, right? More watch designs. So it's coming from all these places. Now, to go back to that rendering I was doing, I love this LED inside the rubber. I think that's great. It seemed very futuristic to me. So that's basically what I was, where I'm getting the idea for this LED technology here. This would just, this is a clear glass, not rubber. However, this is rubber, so as I'm rendering this, I'm also thinking about materials too. So this is kind of a rubber substance, and then this is more of a glass, just to have that contrast. This is neither here nor there. This is just basic design. You want contrast and everything. You want to contrast light and dark, in terms of your values, in colors, in texture. So this to me is a contrast in texture. A perfect automotive surface combined with like a rubber surface. And why did I make this rubber? I made this rubber because if this were to hit something like in a wall, it wouldn't break or fracture, that it could take that impact and it wouldn't be too affected by it. So those thought processes are occurring as well. Once again, thinking all the time. Everything you do, you should think about. And don't walk away with, oh man, that's a lot of thinking, I don't want to do this. Hey, if you don't have any ideas, just draw. By all means, just have fun, please. But as you, for me, you ever sit there when you're drawing and you're wondering like, gee, I don't know what to do, right? Just start like coming up with a story like, oh, what if this were, like, how does this thing fly? That's a good question. Or what happens if, someone hit it? How would it recover? Or maybe that should affect the material. And then once you start getting into the habit of thinking that way, then man, you will never, like, I never ever run out of ideas. I've got 1,000 ideas that just generate all the time that I can't possibly illustrate all of them. And that's what helps me have even more fun when I do this. And therefore, not miserable at my job, right? Got to, find ways to have fun. And I think this goes beyond design. When you're sitting waiting for your car to get smog, well, that's a California problem. Okay, so in California, we have to pass a smog check, and it's really boring. So you could bring a sketchbook and find a way to pass the time, right? Or play games or something. That's just, again, to me, that's just part of the same idea of the process. And I think that achieves most of my latter levels here. This is just more highlights to pop it out, and that's basically how I got this rendering. Now, this is kind of a oven-baked meatloaf. I think we're going over a little bit, but it's okay. I think in another 10 minutes, I can still execute something. So what I want to start from scratch is to fully illustrate this idea. Once again, this idea that I've outlined in red is this tube. So I want to show a version of what this guy looks like when he's completely folded up. And I can simply do that. Because we are stressed for time, I'm going to actually try to do this as quickly as I can, which shouldn't take too long. I'm just going to save this before it crashes, because that's always frustrating. I suppose it's turning into quite a large file. All right. I really love the lasso tool. So I guess this should complete the technical demonstration of today's workshop. Because the lasso tool allows me to be quite lazy.
I suppose you could consider it similar to masking when you're airbrushing with analog artwork.
Oh, absolutely, but this is way better than the Frisket. We called it Frisket. Oh man, those days were terrible. You had to use your X-Acto knife. First of all, you had to go to the store to buy this stuff. So if you had trouble getting around, oh gosh. If you had trouble getting around, it's already started as a miserable experience right there. You got to find a way to get there, right?
I feel like I brought up the memories of the war.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that old, but I think things have changed so fast, actually, in the last 10 years. It's quite fascinating. I was born in the 80s, so...
Now with your masking there, you're using the lasso tool. Looks like you're switching between the traditional lasso tool and the polygonal lasso tool while you're selecting.
Yeah, man, that's also a good thing that you bring up. This changed my life forever because I thought the lasso was just this, which I didn't have the hand-eye coordination to do properly. Especially the way I would use it, I would come in here and try to really get things tight. And then the thing about the polygonal lasso, because you have the option here, is that it looks like it's computer generated because if I try to get a smooth surface, it just looks jaggy like that. And that sucks. And then my first art director as supervillain, he was looking at me make a selection. He's like, "What are you doing, man? You're like." He told me if you draw it like this and then you hold alternate, you can, as long as you hold alternate, you can lift to do a polygonal lasso. And then as long as you hold alternate, you can come back and have a freeform lasso. And when you let go of it, it completes your selection. This literally changed my world forever. You know, like no one's ever showed me that you could do that. And this makes making selections, you can, like, I draw with the lasso most of the time now. I could do the cylinder, and I can come in and cut this out, make another cylinder, and all these cool little shapes. And I could do it fairly accurately as well. You know, and have really controlled shapes all the time. So I really love that tool. Speaking of which, I can clean this up a little bit with it. This is supposed to be a cylinder. Okie dokie. So with the wand tool, I can, let's set that tolerance down to 0. I just want this one. So once again, a lazy man makes a smart man, and I've decided to use this. I'm going to sample the same color because this is supposed to be the same rubber. And I'm using this gradation to do it. A lot of Control-Z in my workflow, by the way. Although, don't get too comfortable. You could Control-Z forever and not have a whole lot at the end of the day. And that's not fun. And so I basically have this tube. Now think about it, it's actually the top surfaces that should be light. This should be a lot lighter than it is. There we go. Let's change that light source a little bit. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense to me. All right. So I'm just getting this to read as quickly as possible. So once again, like in this short little demo, this is no different than how I started all this stuff. This is just a more complicated version. But block it in with a flat shape. Then you can add your gradation as quickly as possible. You can hand paint if you want, if you prefer that look. Once again, style, in my class, we get heavily into style. There's all kinds of different ways of working, and I actually go through a lot of different different techniques, significantly different from this actually. But this one I'm getting to read just really extraordinarily quickly. I can use this as my selection, and then once again, my bits are made with, this splits in 4 different ways. I didn't control my spacing quite right, so let's try it. There we go. And basically, I have 90% of my object at this point. I mean, that's pretty much what I want it to look like, with the exception of this is where some of these things attach. Then I'm going to switch to a softer brush, and now I'm going to manual paint. I kind of like painting in textures in the end because you want it to read right away. I think it's important that, once again, your art director, you're not going to have time to see all the time. So if you need to present something right away, you don't have the time to paint all this, but you do have the time to, it took me literally 2 minutes to block all this stuff in, and you get it, It's not the most amazing thing, but you can read it and you understand it. And maybe with a few words, I can describe to you it's supposed to transform into this, and then you can bridge the connection yourself. However, if you're just kind of noodling a painting and your director comes and then says, "Hey, what do you got for me?" And I was like, "Well, if you give me another hour, you'll see this rendering come out." Right? But you have to come back an hour like, well, that's not going to work. So I prefer to work in a style that communicates as much as possible right away, and then the extra time that you have, hopefully a lot extra, you can just refine a little bit further everything that you're doing.
I think that's good advice for concept artists, whether doing props, characters, or really anything.
Yeah, absolutely anything. Like building a house is different. You don't really want to start putting it on the roof to get an idea of what it looks like before finishing the foundation. I don't think that's recommended. But if it's a paper roof and you're like, no, it'll look like this, just to get a look, just to make sure that you're ready to commit to it, I think that's perfectly fine too. Just don't make it a permanent attachment, Make it easily removable. So in that free extra time I have, I can noodle in here. And then I can post-process that. If this gradation was too mathematical for some of you guys, I can just, in school I used to not like this. Like, you should have sketched it from the beginning. It would have looked better, but after years of spending 80 hours to render this tube to have it look painterly, only to see a painter quickly block it in and then just post-process the effect, and it took him all of 10 minutes to do a painting that took me 3 hours to do better than I did it. That was kind of frustrating. So I succumbed. I was like, oh, I'll incorporate this quicker technique. Because if you're a really good designer and you know what you're doing, you can work backwards to forwards, forwards to backwards, start in the middle, finish with the end, and then come back to the beginning, and it'll look, no one would have figured out how you did it. That's the trademark of a true master, really. That's how well they know everything. So I can choose some darker values. Maybe this rubber stuff isn't pure. So once again, adding a little bit of story to this late part of the rendering I'm doing. This surface kind of curves in a little bit because it's imperfect. Just to have a little bit of fun. Maybe some black goop found its way into these tubes. So once again, I can start in with a blocking process. I like using this boring brush a lot because it allows you to get your silhouette in. And once again, that silhouette is really important. Visually, we read shapes much faster than anything else. Like your form rendering and how long you spend, that's, to me, like, it took me a long time, it took me years to figure out actually that you're wasting your time by making this gradated. That's not important. The design of this shape, this mystery oil, if you will, is very flatly is way more important than, right? You don't want even shapes. You know, I can have a little skinny one here to increase that contrast between a thicker shape versus a skinnier shape. And at this point, that's just basic design principle, which again I go over in my class if you guys are interested. I think I spend a week lecturing about that. And if it's still not sinking in, I'll definitely make it sink in during the Q&A session and the critiques. Okay, so I have this goop, and I can create another layer. Actually, once again, because I'm lazy, I can use that layer as a selection. And even go back to that gradation tool. I know this is a cylinder. That might be a bit much. And now I'm going to erase with an airbrush here. Kind of the edge of this. And of course, for my industrial design days, what really makes goop or things really shiny is having this really hard kind of reflection. Smudgy tool.
Always a classic.
Always a classic. The trick is to use these common tools in a way that doesn't, you know, you kind of have to hide your tracks a little bit, you know, erase a little bit, stuff like that. I love it when artists are so bold. It's like, did you just use the leaf tool in Photoshop? And it's like, yes, I did. And it's so blatant in your face, but works in such a beautiful way. That's always magical. But that's almost like just having great people skills, you know? It's just like, did you just say what politically you're not allowed to say, but say it because it's on everyone's mind, and like, you know, those are great moments. So it's similar. It's similar in art. All these things are really related. That's why I love doing this stuff. It's almost like a religious experience, you know. You just need to think about life. You know, why are you doing what you do? Is it helping you? Is it helping somebody? Is it even worth doing, or are you just kind of wasting your time?
And I think that's kind of important, especially when it comes to concept artists, that it's more than just having solid artistic skills. It's having a point of view, being able to align that point of view with the director, and being able to communicate something that the audience can relate to.
Oh yeah, I mean, that starts to get into like, do you do it for money or you do it for yourself, you know, and who you listen to, you know, your art director, and maybe you guys are aligned in the same way and you want to both be expressive. And so, yeah, like, yeah, expressing that view. You know, like I'd love to. That's why I like Titmouse as Titmouse is a pretty young company, and since it's kind of small and it's starting to be, you know, come on the map, especially with Motor City and Black Dynamite starting to air. But being such a young studio, man, they push like some of the things that we can get away with Once again, I'm gonna promote Black Dynamite a little bit in that it's a really adult cartoon, and man, some of the things that they get away with is like, I remember designing like, can we go that far, you know? And then my art director would tell me, Derek, don't ever ask how far you can go. You go as far as you can go, and we'll tell you when to pull it back. And I'm like, okay, like, all right. And so, as an example, I'll describe in words some of the things I did. And once again, it's a really adult show, so listener discretion be advised. There's kind of an episode that is kind of like a porno episode. Because it totally takes place in the 1970s. So I was drawing like penises and vaginas in my backgrounds like almost all day long, and there's this one shot where one of the characters wins an award, and so in the storyboards, what was designed was he's just in front of a podium receiving an Oscar. And storyboarders are responsible for storyboards. They don't have time to design, you know, so they're just gonna draw a box for a podium and like a little man as a sculpture. It's up to the designers to figure out the rest. And so what I did with that is like, I'm gonna make the microphone a penis, and then I'm gonna make the podium these two golden ladies holding up, you know, this the deck of the microphone, because that's totally what the episode's all about. And as I was doing this, you know, I was kind of wondering, are they going to let me get away with this? And no one ever said anything. And Adult Swim is also a network that pushes the envelope. They never said anything. They thought it was great. And I was like, wow, you know, like you can, you know, push. I mean, and that's another idea as designers too that I recommend. Don't let anything limit you. Like who cares what other people think? You push it as far as you think it needs to go, and you can always pull it back. But if you start by pulling away too much, you'll never know how far you can go. You know, I say overwork your drawing rather than underwork it, because if you underwork it, you never know how far it could have gone, and it could have been a lot better. But as soon as you overwork it, it's like, yep, I know exactly when I should have toned it down, and you'll know. So I think those are, you know, a great example in my life, personal life, of that idea.
Well, I think that that's a good note to really end this on, some really good and some really practical advice on not necessarily just the drawing, but some of the stuff that goes behind the artwork in film, games, television shows, wherever you are. So I really want to say thank you. It was an excellent demonstration that you gave us here, Derek. And for everyone, again, this is Derek Kosol. He is the instructor for the Prop Design Computer Graphics Master Academy course.
Thanks, guys, and it's been a pleasure. I really look forward to teaching the class in the next week, and I hope to see some of you guys that are here today in the class. So thanks so much for an hour of your an hour and a half of your very important Saturday.
Very cool. Well, thank you all for attending again on behalf of CGMA. Don't forget to check out more of Derek's class and other classes that we have on our main website at cgmwmasterclasses.com. Again, to Ben, to Derek, thank you both for your time.